can make in just a short period of time. My guest during this segment of the Mildred Gaddis Show has been honored as one of the best lawyers in America, the oldest and most respected peer-review publication in the legal profession. I'm talking about attorney Gerald Thurswell, who is a highly regarded expert in medical malpractice, birth injury, as well as auto accident litigation. And he's also, in the past, taken on some case as it relates to police brutality and incidents that occurred as a result of decisions made by individual that ultimately caused a death. We're talking about Mackenzie McBride in the Northland Mall incident where Mackenzie Cochran was not. He was held down by security guards. He told them he couldn't breathe, needed help. By the time help came, he was dead. Renisha McBride was shot on the front porch of a person in Dearborn, I think it's Dearborn Heights, where she was trying to get some help knocking on a door. He has also represented the Malice Green family and is joining us here on the Mildred Gaddis Show today. How are you, Counselor?
Fine. How are you, Mildred?
Fine. Well, we've had some time, and I guess a lot of us are still trying to figure this thing out. What went wrong in Baltimore as it relates to the death of Freddie Gray?
Well, as best I can put together from the reports and from the charges, apparently he was looking at a police officer, and apparently he looked at the police officer the wrong way, and he just ran. And the police officer chased him, had no reason to chase him. They knew nothing about him. They chased him. They handcuffed him, put him in the side of this van, and handcuffed him, and they handcuffed his legs. And then apparently, purposefully, he's lying on the back of the van. The driver of the van is told to drive fast. He drives fast, and the young boy, Gray, hits his head on a screw or a bolt in the back of the van, and he begs for medical help, and they don't get him medical help. And in fact, they drive to a Korean grocery store for some reason. I have no idea. Then they leave the grocery store, and he's crying for help. And apparently the entire injury that he sustained was by the van speeding up and then stopping, causing his head to hit this bolt. They then stop, and they pick up another suspect and put him in the van. And then apparently there's a third stop somewhere, and then finally they get to the police station. Only after they get to the police station do they then decide to take him to the hospital. And apparently his esophagus is crushed. He severs his spine. He ultimately goes into a coma, and then he dies. This conduct, I can't believe it. It is so outrageous. It is so reprehensible. It's unbelievable. The kid did nothing wrong. He looked at the cop looked at him, and he ran. There's no reason to arrest somebody just because you look at a cop and you run away from a cop. No reason whatsoever. The kid did nothing wrong. There were no charges brought against the kid at all. Initially, apparently, they said he had a switchblade. Apparently, it was a pocket knife. It wasn't a switchblade. It was a knife that you could just open, and it's totally legal in Baltimore to carry a pocket knife. But they had no reason to arrest him, no reason to God, they killed him. They absolutely killed him.
Do you know what's scary? What's scary is some of us are learning that we cannot trust the word of police officers. You know, police officers know in the state of Maryland that it is not against the law in Maryland to have a pocket knife. And here you have police officers lying about the kind of knife the young man had.
There was no reason even to begin with to stop him. If you look at a police officer and you decide to run away from a police officer that you see, that's not a crime. There's no probable cause. There's no reason to arrest him. None whatsoever. It's just, I just can't believe it. I just can't believe it. And I think once before we had discussed this on your show that police officers, not only should they be trained on how to shoot a gun and how to arrest somebody and how to handcuff them and how to take them down, but they have to go through psychological training. There's a sickness out there in a very, very small percentage of the police officers. What is it, 0.5%? But if it's your child, your brother, your spouse that is a subject to behavior like this, it's one case too many.
Teresa, you're on the Mildred Gaddis Show with attorney Gerald Thurswell.
Thank you for taking my call. What disturbs me is the van. I mean, the one man that gave the testimony, he said he was arrested for a minor offense or something like with a cigarette. I mean, maybe the men just scared. That's why they're running. If they have a police van, going around gathering up black men over minor offenses, and harassing them and beating them up, that's maybe why he ran.
There was no minor offense. There was no offense. There was no offense whatsoever. That's what I'm trying to say, that there's, 0.5%, 0.1% of the police officers who get involved in this conduct. But 0.5%, if it's your child, your relative, your spouse, that is the subject of this, that's one too many. And that's why these people have to have psychiatric evaluations, and maybe not just initial, but maybe after every 2 years or every 6 months or whatever. Because if it's your family member, that's one person too many, and it can happen to any one of our children, any one of our family members. It could happen to ourselves.
We were talking with Wayne County Sheriff Ben Napoleon last week, who said that once this psychological testing or whatever it is, when you hire in an officer, once it's done, that's it. Officers are not required to go back at a designated time after serving on the force for a number of years to get another evaluation done after he's had all these experiences as a police officer. And, it seems to me, and as you've just said, Counselor,
and because they don't want to be arrested, they will just become limp and make them carry you to the van or into the police car. I don't think anybody is going to dispute as to his physical condition when they put him into the van. I didn't see any reports to say that he was injured before that. He was running from the police, so therefore physically he was able to run. And they brought him down, brought him back to where the van was. I mean, if he was running from the police, clearly he wasn't injured. So sometime between the time they stopped him from running and brought him back to the van, it's conceivable that he was injured. But apparently from the autopsy report from the medical examiner who declared this a homicide said it was the injury to the head. He's lying flat. The van stops. His whole body goes into this bolt, causes the injury to the head, and causes the severing of the spinal cord.
It's 5:30 in the Motor City. Attorney Gerald Thurswell of the Thurswell Law Firm is my guest. We'll be right back. If you have any questions or comments, we'd love to hear from you. 568-1200. That's our number.
Compelling talk you can count on. This is the Mildred Gaddis Show on News Talk AM 1200 and 99.9 FM WCHB.
Bring the beat in. Honey, honey, I can see the stars all the way from here.
It's 5:35 in the city of Detroit. The question, what's happening in America? I do want to share this with everybody because I think it is a bit refreshing. Last week, Senator Gary Peters of Michigan, the junior senator from Michigan, introduced some legislation, and he was able to get 2 Republican senators to join him. Last Thursday, they introduced the Bipartisan National Criminal Justice Commission Act of 2015. This legislation would create a National Criminal Justice Commission. That commission would review the criminal justice system from top to bottom and propose reforms to address the most pressing issues facing the nation's criminal justice system. In the press release, Peter said recent incidents like the traffic stop of Floyd Dent in Inkster, Michigan, the civil unrest in areas like Baltimore, Maryland, and Ferguson, Missouri, have highlighted the need for a top-to-bottom evaluation of our criminal justice system. And he went on to say, with the troubling rise in tensions between police and civilians in communities in Michigan and across the country, more than 2 million people in prison and unsustainable cost, it is clear that an overhaul of our criminal justice system is long overdue. Now, the last time we heard something like this was in 1967. And in 1968, we came to know about what was then under the leadership of President Lyndon Johnson, the Kerner Commission and the Kerner Report. I just think this is great. I just think it's great if the U.S. Congress and the president, if the Congress is good at getting the right people on the commission, Attorney Gerald Thurswell, this could be good news.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know what's very interesting? Everybody is proposing these cameras, the video cameras.
Yes.
And and Peter's proposed that as part of everything he was saying. There was an interesting article that I read today. Let's assume you do the video. How long does the video, how long should you keep the video? 6 months, a year, 2 years? Is the video available to the public under the Freedom of Information Act if nobody's been injured or nobody's making any claim? So there's issues with it. How long do they keep them? And who is it available to? How is it available? Do you invade anybody's privacy just because somebody's talking to a police officer? They may not have been arrested. It was just an encounter. There's a lot of issues. And when they pass that legislation, hopefully somebody will have thought about a lot of these things and will consult with a lawyer who is familiar with the Freedom of Information Act and who it would be available to and when. So
that's very important.
I agree that something's got to be done. A commission has to be set up. There's too much of this going on throughout the country. Just too much.
5:39 in the city of Detroit. Andrew, you're on the air.
Hi. Good afternoon to the best lawyer in town and the best talk show host. I wanted to say that as a medical professional, somebody needs to re-examine that tape that they showed of him when he was being arrested. I believe the injury happened. It had to happen. I'm sure he has more than one injury, but it happened with the initial arrest right there with the police, the bike police. Because, yes, I give you that people go limp, but the man was not just limp. He was screaming in pain. All you had to do was look at his face and listen to him. He was screaming, and nobody was paying attention to that. So speak to that. I think that he had several injuries, but the initial injury to his back, to his spine, happened right there.
Well,
thank you.
Let me ask you this question. How about the individual who dives into a swimming pool that's only 3 or 4 feet deep, and they hit their head, and then they become paralyzed because the spinal cord has been severed? You take his body, and it's straight, lying flat on the floor of the van. And the operator of the van decides to play games with him or intentionally injure him. They speed up and they stop, and his body just slides forward, and the head hits this bolt. I'm not saying that the bolt caused all the injury, but take a stiff body and jam it into a wall.
I'm not denying any of that.
And that's what happened here.
I'm not denying any of that happened. I mean, I'm not denying those injuries. I'm telling you that one of the injuries happened with the initial takedown and the handcuffing. When they dragged him, It was not the drag of somebody whose whole body is limp. It was the lower portion of his body, and he was screaming.
Well, let me say this to you, Angie. You know, this is what Thurswell does. It's his life. It's the air he breathes. I mean, this has been his career. Terry in Detroit, I'm glad you checked in.
Yes, good afternoon. And I also feel that if they laid him on his back or his head and the other prisoner in the van was able to hear him, that something that sounded like he was banging his head, if that prisoner could hear something like that, the driver should have been able to hear something like that. And could you imagine driving a van and all of a sudden you hear all these loud sounds in the back of your van?
Now, Terry,
and a person with common sense would pull over and see, well, what is all that loud banging?
Terry.
And then they would see that he was not secure and that he was hurt. They didn't even try to help. That's the only reason that I really feel that the person that was driving the van, yeah, he did. He might not have been a part of the first injury, but I think that he bared a lot of responsibility, and I really believe that the law lady, I'm sorry, I really believe that she was correct.
You know, here's what is very important, people, to remember. We don't know if what the prisoner says he heard is what he heard. We don't know. We don't know. And somehow in a court of law, hopefully, they will be able to get to the truth. And I'll be very honest, based upon what we've been hearing here with police and their stories, we don't know who this prisoner was. We don't know how ethical he is. We don't know. So we don't know if this is these are the actual facts. We don't know if this is some story he concocted. We just don't know. What I want to talk about, Attorney Thurswell, is what happens now. In a group like this, are they all tried together? Are they tried individually? Does the state attorney go to the weakest link, the one who committed the least infraction here, and make a deal to get evidence on the others? What happens now?
Well, I want to just backtrack one thing. And Mildred, you said this at the very beginning of your show. This man was in their custody, and now he's dead. And clearly, if he was running away from the police, he was alive and relatively in good shape to run away from the police. And while he was in their custody, he died. And their acts, either intentional or negligently, have resulted in the death. And what's very interesting is those officers can ask for separate trials, and the court can grant them separate trials. Then that happens all the time. You can have individual trials for each one of these people. And you're 100% correct. They take the least culpable person and they try to cut a deal with him. Look, we'll let you plead to this and we'll recommend a lighter sentence, but tell us what really happened. I want to backtrack on another thing, too, from your caller who was talking about the other prisoner in the van. He was the only prisoner in the van initially when he was arrested. They made the stop at the grocery store, and then they made the stop to pick, according to the reports. First it was a stop at the Korean grocery store, then it was a stop to pick up the other prisoner. Then there was a third stop. The driver of the van stopped because apparently he heard something going on in the back and he wanted to check it out. And then the fourth stop was at the police station, and at the police station is when they decided, God, he's really injured. We've got to take him to the hospital. So that was your chronology of events. But getting back, you're 100% right, Mildred. They will try to cut a deal with the least culpable person to have him tell the truth and describe exactly what happened in the chronology of events.
It is. So what's your legal hunch telling you about these trials, individually or what?
Well, let me say this to you. Some of the people were charged in the investigation that they didn't do a thorough investigation afterwards. Some of the people charged were after the fact. So those people who did that investigation after the fact and apparently may have may have submitted a false report. Those people are least culpable because they didn't cause the injury. They just weren't reporting it accurately and investigating it properly. Some of the people, I think, will be charged, minimally, and then those are the others, the people in the van and anything to do with the van. Those people are going to be charged with a large crime, a serious crime.
It's 5:46 in the city. Eric, talk to us.
Yes, I'm mistaken that I heard a report stating that my brother, Mr. Gray's esophagus was crushed.
That's what we had heard. That the esophagus was crushed and that he severed his spine. I'm wondering, and I'm just throwing this out there, if you take a stiff body where you're handcuffed with your legs and your hands both, you're lying flat on your back, and you speed up the van, and then you stop, and then everything gets crushed and pushed together. Your head hits the wall or this bolt, and everything gets crushed and put together. That was a pretty huge impact, a crushing impact, causing the whole body, to hit that wall. So that's what I'm surmising.
Attorney Thurswell, and I always ask this question because I think it's so important. What's the lesson here? What's the lesson for police officers, and what's the effort for the citizenry?
Oh my God, the lesson. It's just, I think when we talked earlier and when that one caller talked in about these officers have to be evaluated psychologically. Did they think they were playing a game? We have to have these people evaluated, these officers. Initially, like that caller said, they come across on an evaluation and they look great, but based on what they encounter a year or 2 or 3 out in the field, how have they changed? We have to have these officers evaluated. This is craziness. Normal people don't do this. Normal people don't do it. Why would you want to injure somebody who is totally and completely innocent? They can't even make up a charge. They can't make up a charge to justify lying him flat in the van, handcuffed, feet and hands. How do you justify it? Little kids play games to, hurt other little kids, but they only hurt them with minimal injuries. This is serious stuff, and we have to have these officers evaluated. And I don't care what the cost is. You have to have them evaluated, and they have to be taken off the street. They have to be taken off the street if they don't pass rigorous psychological evaluations. Isn't that really the bottom line on all these cases, that these officers psychologically, they just get carried away. They don't know how to handle situations. They create situations.
One cities and municipalities are going to have to learn is that they can't have it both ways. And what I mean by that is they want good, effective policing, but they're unwilling to expand the budgets so that those police officers from time to time are checked out. They won't let these law enforcement agencies have the money to do that, and when you don't, look what you end up with. And the reality is, these incidents that we know about are just the ones that have made it to the news. Attorney Thurswell, and I know the numbers have changed now because when I received these stats, it was at least 30 days ago. It was in April. Since January 1 of this year, we had 62 unarmed black people, 4 of them women, had been shot and killed by police. And in small towns, we're rarely able to get those stats, but not all of them make their way. So we don't know how many. We have no way of knowing how many of these incidents have occurred in this country.
And so many that are just unjustifiable, just so unjustifiable. It's and you're 100% right. We don't know all the statistics. But if it's one person, it's one person too many. It's one person too many. You know, you can talk about these video cameras and maybe people will act better because they're being watched. But the bottom line is, why do we even have to get to that stage? Why can't we nip it in the bud and have people come in for psychological testing? Why? And especially people who have encountered this or that on the streets that may have affected their outlook, have them evaluated even more frequently.
Absolutely. Listen, folk, I want to thank you, Attorney Thurswell, and I want to give people the number to the Thurswell Law Firm. And also, you need to know, let me just give you the numbers. There's a toll-free number, 866-354-5544. That's 866-354-5544. Or you can call 248-354-2222. 248-354-2222, and call either of those numbers and you can get a free legal consultation. And that's pretty cool. Attorney Thurswell, Gerald Thurswell, thank you so much. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Mildred. Have a good evening.
You too. Bye-bye.